pause while Scott spills his whiskey on his keyboard. This is why we stopped recording in person, and this is why we need Bailey here to make us have some manners, right? Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. We are coming to you live from Scott's front porch.
We are. It's a beautiful slow Friday afternoon after
a long week.
Yeah, a very long week. Lots of very bad things happening in the legislature this week.
Yeah,
it was not a banner week for Oklahomans.
No, some good things happened.
There was one big notable event that we'll get into, but lots of not great developments.
Right. Yeah. So we are recording this as always on Friday afternoon. Bailey is out of town. She's in Tulsa today and can't join us. And so you just have Scott and me today, and we're gonna talk through what happened this week. It is a deadline week. Thursday, March 24th was the deadline for bills to pass off the floor of their chamber of origin. So crossover, right?
Yeah.
So things are
House bills got to pass the House, Senate bills got to pass the Senate. Now, Andy, if there is a Senate bill that was introduced this week that did not pass the Senate, does that mean that bill is dead?
Only mostly dead. Oh, but mostly dead means partly alive.
Yeah. Still slightly alive.
Yeah.
So nothing is completely out of play so far, especially if it's a bill that is favored by leadership.
Right, or authored by leadership. That's exactly right. And that's particularly important because, well, it is in the rules. It says that, right, that bills are dead unless, the Speaker pro tem wants them to be alive. And if they authored it, they want it to be alive.
Because that is how democracy works.
Right.
It's that if it failed to pass, it's dead, unless the boss wants it to be alive, in which case that's fine.
Right. Everyone gets a voice, but some voices count a little bit more than others.
Oh dear. So
well,
it's in our life.
That's right. That's right. So we're just gonna kind of go through a few things today because I think on the whole, Scott, it's as we move through session, things do calm down a bit, right? After today or after this week, there are roughly 700 bills. I think 680 is what Sean Ashley had posted on Twitter that are from this session. Now, there are some bills from last year, right? Because technically each legislature is a 2-year process.
Right.
So we are in the second regular session of the 58th legislature.
Correct.
Last year, 2021, was the first regular session. This is the second regular session thus far. No, there was a special session, wasn't there? Last fall, yeah, in November. There was one for redistricting. That's right.
Yes.
How could I forget?
Because there was a lot of hubbub about whether there was going to be vaccine stuff.
Right. So anyway, second regular session, which means all the bills that were filed last year that were not yet dead for one reason or another, eligible for reconsideration or moved through the process and then didn't get killed, right? Because there's a way that bills just live on without being dead.
Yeah. So there's things you could do. There's shell bills that can have language inserted into them later. Leadership can put something. They can put it into a joint committee. Now there is something. Well, let's get into 1647 and then we'll talk about how some of this stuff works.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say if a bill isn't voted down, if it's just not heard, it can come back up.
Yeah. The other thing is, so when a bill is defeated and it is voted down, oftentimes the author will make a motion to reconsider at a later date, which means that they can bring the bill back later to be voted on again. If they don't do that, then no bill having the same language or substantively the same language or that is accomplishing substantively the same goal can be heard again that session. Unless the speaker or the pro tem wants it to be heard again that session.
Right. Yeah. There's rules, and then there's what actually happens. We learn this more and more every year. So Scott, let's start with Senate Bill 2, because that was from last year, and that passed the Senate this year. So it was it was started in the Senate last year, went to the House last year, got amended, went back to the Senate, and was not heard.
Right.
Just floated, just hanging out.
Right. Do we know why? Because last year there was a big deal that it wasn't heard last year. Do we know what the impetus was for it to be heard this year when they didn't hear it last year? Why that happened?
I'll tell you what I've heard, what I think is the case.
Yeah.
So first of all, Senate Bill 2 deals with
Trans athletes. It says basically
transgender athletes.
whatever your biological sex is at birth, those are the only sports teams on which you can play.
Right. And undoubtedly our listeners have seen the tweets and the social media posts about from the Republicans mostly, right, who are angry with this, who are pause while Scott spills his whiskey on his keyboard. This is why we stopped recording in person, and this is why we need Bailey here to make us have some manners, right? Proceed. Anyway, so yes, the bill deals with trans athletes, and surely our listeners have seen the social media posts that are couching this as like an issue for specifically women's sports, right? It's not coming up on the other side, which is interesting by itself.
Right.
But
They're framing this bill as like somehow protecting women, right? Like that's what the
Republicans
that's
are.
Like that's the deal. Is that like they're trying to hamstring the Dems and civil rights organizations by saying this is a pro-women women's rights bill.
Right. Which is just not the. There's a lot of the debate here that is just not factual, right? And in fact, flies in the face of accepted science.
Yes.
So, also, they're not arguing that this is they are arguing this is a women's issue thing, but not a men's issue thing. Probably because many of them don't view that like gymnastics is a bona fide sport, right? But like they're trying to prevent a trans woman student athlete from participating in like track and field or those kind.
They are trying to prevent someone who was born with an XY chromosome pattern, who later transitioned and identifies as female, to participate in women's sports, because they are saying that one, that person would have an inherent advantage because they have an XY chromosome instead of two X chromosomes, and because they think that there is like some like danger to that person being allowed in like a women's locker room. Presumably, they don't think that there's any danger of a trans woman, someone who was born with two X chromosomes and then transitions and identifies as a man. They, one, don't think that person would be able to compete at the same level as people that were born, with XY chromosomes, and two, they don't think that there's a danger from that person being in the locker room.
Right. So anyway, this bill is not based in science. It's based in fear and political positioning. And the point of us talking about it is that it came up last year, and you asked me why it didn't pass last year. From what I've heard and what I suspect is that Senator Treat didn't actually want this bill to pass. Like he wasn't really interested in dealing with these kinds of social issues.
Yeah.
However, as we will talk about in a minute, he had another bill on the agenda this week that was heard on Wednesday night, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a big deal. And he was doing a lot of deals, just letting people saying like, hey, we'll hear anything if you will vote for my bill. Yeah, right? That didn't work out for him in the end. But, I know that there were other legislators, from what I've heard, that have made deals this week to vote for Senate Bill 1647, which is the voucher bill we've discussed previously and we'll talk more about here. But I know that there are people who voted for that this week because they had made a deal that, a bill that they have authored would be heard elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's is it a foregone conclusion then that this bill is signed by the governor?
I think so.
So here's the reason I raised this question. So this week, Republican governors in Indiana, and Utah have vetoed legislation that's very similar to SB2. Utah and Indiana, not known as bastions of liberalism, right?
Right.
Um,
Republican governors in both places, I think.
Yeah, both. Yeah, Republican governors. Now it looks like the one in Utah is going to be overridden by their legislature, but the governors of both states vetoed them, citing that they thought that this is one, lack of evidence for efficacy and necessity; two, compassion for the isolation of transgender youth, and concern finally about litigation that will be inevitably filed to challenge these laws. I think there's a fourth. That, by the way, is from a press release by the Human Rights Campaign, which is a national organization that represents the LGBTQ community. But I think there's a fourth reason that they don't list, and this is the one that I might wonder about: economic development.
Right.
We have seen in cities and states across the country where these laws have been passed that major corporations say they will not locate their headquarters in states that pass these kinds of laws. Major sporting events say they will not host events, they won't host tournaments, they won't host, that they will not operate in states that pass these kinds of laws. So from an economic development standpoint, you can make a strong case that this is not a good law. Merits of the law aside, which there are none, and it's terrible. But even if this is a law, even if this is a social policy that you agree with, there were some estimates last year. I think didn't even the state chamber come out in opposition to this bill last year?
The state chamber or the Oklahoma City chamber, but yeah,
somebody came out with
the
an estimate of
NCAA, right? Like
hundreds of millions of dollars in economic losses. For the state if this was to become law.
Well, to put a very fine point on that, the NCAA March Madness basketball tournament, which is going on right now, they've hosted the Final Four here a couple of times.
Have we hosted a Final Four? We've hosted regional several times.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever hosted a Final Four.
I thought we did once. Anyway, well, whatever. It's a bunch of games and a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And the NCAA had said several years ago with the bathroom bills, right? Like the transgender bathroom bills for North Carolina and Oklahoma, that they were not going to host tournaments there anymore if they passed this kind of legislation, which is just millions and millions of dollars of outside money coming into our state, right? And it's stupid.
And it's not even just the basketball tournaments. The softball tournament, which we host every year.
Yeah.
The College World Series is a major draw, right? It's policy aside, and it's bad policy. It's not a benign thing, and we've got a governor who is predicating his, re-election, I think, in a big way on economic development and bring, the canoe thing is going to be a huge deal that he's going to point to. He's got some other wins I think he's going to try and point to.
Well, and beside that, that's what I keep thinking about is, okay, sports aside, like that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
But like businesses don't want to go into climates that are just like politically poisonous, right? And that have any inkling of intolerance towards people. And what's weird to me, I think, is that a lot of elected officials will say, oh, well, we don't want those businesses, right? We don't want those liberal businesses. We want other businesses. But I think that is out of step of where society is headed, right? And I also think it is out of step with what they're actually trying to do. Oklahoma made a big effort to get Tesla to come here.
Right.
And we lost for a myriad of reasons.
Right.
But undoubtedly, this kind of stuff does not help our argument, right? I would imagine.
Right. Yeah.
Elon Musk is a weird guy, but I don't think that he wants to face the hurdle of trying to get people to move to a state that is in the news because...
For all the wrong reasons.
All the wrong reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Totally agree.
So that was Senate Bill 2. Let's recap where we're at. So that came up in 2021. Then it moved almost like 3/4 the way through the process.
Yeah.
And then just sat dormant. And they brought it back up this year, passed it, so now it goes to the governor. I think he'll sign it because he issued that executive order about changing your gender on your birth certificate.
Right.
And he basically...
Which also passed this week.
Right, yeah. So he had previously, with that executive order, prevented the State Department of Health from issuing new birth certificates to adults who transitioned and in the same way that you might get married and change your name, right? Like that, the same process. And yeah, so to back up his executive order, there was a bill this week to do that same thing that passed. But because he signed that bill or that executive order, I suspect that's the side of this issue he's on.
And I think you're right. I think that he will too. I just was trying to think, like, is there a reason that he might not? But I think you're right. I think he signs it, and then we'll deal with the fallout.
Well, so I think that's a good transition then to talk about the other bill that we've referenced a few times.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 1647.
Drama, man. So Senate Bill 1647. This is the so-called voucher bill. I say so-called because Senator Treat, pro tem, who authored the bill, insists it's not a voucher bill. Hint, it really is a voucher bill. This was introduced at the beginning of session. This is the bill that would allow any family to essentially take whatever funds the state of Oklahoma is using for public education of their child and apply it to private school tuition. They'll let you transfer out of any school that you want to, and you get the money essentially to help defray those costs. This has been controversial since he introduced it. I think the day that this came out, Speaker McCall has said, like, the bill's not going to be heard in the House. He has no intention of hearing the bill in the House. His caucus isn't for it. They haven't discussed it. His members don't want it. They're not going to do it. It's interesting because despite that staunch opposition, Senator Treat has forged ahead. He got the bill out of committee. I believe this is the bill that Senator Treat and Senator McCourtney had to come to committee to break the tie to get the bill out of committee. It has come up on the schedule, the floor schedule of the Senate multiple times. It's been posted and added onto the floor schedule and then come down. When that happens, it usually means they don't have the votes, right? They put it on the schedule saying, we're going to vote on this bill later, and then they take it down when they realize that it's not going to pass. I think an old like kind of adage of political leadership. I've never been a political leader myself, but what I hear is you don't ever call a vote where you don't already know the outcome, right?
Right.
You may lose, you may win, but you better know what's going to happen before you call the vote.
Right. Well, and Treat acknowledged that
Yes.
he does not like to lose. He does not bring things to a vote unless he knows he's got the votes.
Right.
But this was deadline week.
Right. And so the bill came up for a vote on, and the third thing is the governor is a huge proponent of this as well. Governor Stitt he has the backing of the full force of the governor's office. So the bill came up for a vote on Wednesday night. It was the last bill that was heard. There was a couple hours of questions and debate, right? And then Senator Treat gave his closing statement. They opened it up, and we had we pretty quickly got to a spot where we had 20
A tie, right?
Well, we had 23 red and 21 green, right? And then we had a couple people flip their votes. And so for a minute there, we had 23 green and 21 red. Fun fact, bill has to have 25 votes to pass the Senate. And there were two senators that could not be there. Senator Dom was fundraising for his senatorial campaign in Washington, D.C., so that's a presumed yes vote that wasn't there.
Can I interject to say
Yes.
he also posted on social media that his fundraiser was with
Rand Paul.
Yeah, Senator Rand Paul, who's a libertarian for all intents and purposes, right? And Senator Dom's post or his thing said that Rand Paul supports me because he knows that I'm not a career politician. And
What the hell is he?
I was like, you've been in office for 10 years and you're running for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
You are a politician.
You are in fact a career politician.
You're not a farmer.
Yeah.
You're not a banker.
Right.
You're not a
If you win
plumber.
your Senate race, are you going to serve one term and retire? No.
right.
No, you're not.
No. At what point do you become a career politician?
If you're not a career politician, you aspire to be one. If you run for the Senate, you aspire to be a career politician.
Right. But I guess
Which is fine. But just own it.
right. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
I love career politicians. They're better at their jobs.
Many of them are, not all.
Yes, I mean,
But yeah, it's just like okay, I get what you're saying, But you're wrong, one. And then two, when does someone become a career politician, right? Is it after 12 years?
Right.
14, 16, 20?
Sure.
My mom used to say that she didn't believe the founding fathers intended for people to be in Congress for 30 years.
They didn't live long enough.
She's probably right, because they didn't live long
They
enough.
died at 50.
But I think we've also seen the flip side of that, right? That we have, with term limits, then you lose a ton of institutional knowledge every decade or so.
Andy, I graduated medical school and got my license in July of 2011. It's 2022. You think I'm my career doctor?
A career doctor? I think so.
Probably. But anyway, so the bill came up for a vote on Wednesday night. Senator Matthews, Senator Dom were not there. We were at 23-21 for a while. 23 on the green, 21 on the red. But a bill needs 25 to pass the Senate. I thought we were done because when they got to that 23, I forget who was presiding at the time, but the chair came on and said, if you wish to cast a vote or change your vote, do it now. The chair is preparing to close. That was like 10:10, I think, 10:15.
Yeah.
When did the vote actually close, Andy?
Like midnight. Right?
Yeah.
No, 11:45.
Yeah, 11:45. So please, if you wish to vote or change your vote, please do it now. The chair is preparing to close. Well, an hour and 45 minutes later.
Well, it's like last call, right? Like,
right.
The bar is going to close. Get your last beer.
Well, they don't do the last call an hour and a half before the bar closes.
I've been to some bars that did.
Well, those are shitty bars.
They were shitty bars. That's exactly right.
Those are shitty bars.
Turn the lights on. Everyone's like, oh. Yeah, so I went to bed around 11 o'clock because I was like, all right.
I watched until, I think I watched 11:15, and I was like, but they could not get it over the line, and the final roll call ended up being, what, 24, 21?
Yeah.
Yeah.
24, 22.
24, 20, something like that, yeah. They had a couple of people flip back and forth a couple of times. Some notable votes. Senator Brooks, I think, is Brooks the only Dem that voted for it? Several R's in opposition, mostly from the rural caucus.
I suspect a lot of people were in a lot of consternation online about Brooks, and knowing him, I suspect this was a deal that was brokered, right?
Agreed. So it did not pass. Importantly, well, at least normally it would be important. Senator Treat did not move to reconsider the bill at a later date. So if he was anybody else, it'd be dead. But he's not anybody else.
Right.
He's the pro tem. So I suspect this is going to come back in budget negotiations, is my suspicion. Interestingly, also, not only was Senator Treat on the floor, using all the force of his, relationships and offices, etc., to try and get this thing over the finish line. It was about 10:45. The governor's staff showed up. So
the Secretary of State did.
Well, he was there the whole time watching.
And he had the governor on the phone and was like handing the phone to legislators on the floor.
I think the governor showed up. I
don't know. I wasn't there, but from people I talked to that were there, they said that the Secretary of State was like handing the phone to people, and like literally it's such a weird thing because it feels like this is not how real life should operate. But like, two senators would be talking, and someone would walk up and literally grab their arm and like lead them away from that person to like end the conversation.
Yeah.
And it was just like, is that really how
Apparently.
this happens? This is like a middle school dance.
I mean, that's what it looks like. But I think this, we're going to see this rear its head again. I think it's going to come up in the budget negotiation. I will confess, and maybe off the top of your head, Andy, I don't. What is the process? Right? Like, the bill has not passed the Senate. At some point, it will have to pass the Senate, right? Like, what is the process for it to get brought up again? I know the pro tem can, but can he put it on the calendar when they're hearing House bills in 2 weeks?
Yeah. And I suspect it'll come up in May, probably at the end of May.
Well, sure.
As part of the budget bills, right? Because they usually run through like a series of bills that are revealed at a few hours in advance.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree, but what's the is there a motion he has to make? Does it have to go through the committee process again, or he can just say we're going to vote on this again?
So, yeah, it's already through the committee, so it just has to be added to the floor calendar, and that can be done the day of. I mean, like in the moment, actually, and I'm going to say, like, it has to go through the floor leader, which is McCourtney, but he's got to do it because that's his boss, right? And I expect between now and then a lot of horse trading is going to go on, where he's going to be saying like, "We'll give you this if you vote for that," right? Like, and that's how it'll happen.
So,
But even if that's the case, it hasn't gone through the House yet.
right, where there is staunch opposition. Now, I also think, you could tell me if you think I'm wrong, I think McCall has a tighter leash on his caucus than Treat does.
Really?
You don't think so?
No, the House is rowdy.
The House is rowdy. That's you're not wrong.
Thank you.
But I think the House is rowdy. But I also think McCall throws around a lot of money over there.
Yeah, but doesn't he sit on like a leadership pack with a bunch of money? I mean, when him and Kennedy ran that like subversive attack against the far right caucus a few years ago, I think there's just more in the House, right? There's 100 people, right? And there's only like 19 Dems, so there's 80 Republicans.
Which also means you don't need as many.
No, but well, you need more.
I mean, you need more, but like
percentage-wise,
you can lose a bigger percentage, right?
Yeah,
like,
but they're all over the state. You got a lot more rural folks over in the House, and it's just, I feel like the House treats themselves. And if you sit in the gallery and watch, the House is more exciting to watch. Like,
there's no doubt.
The Senate's kind of boring.
I mean, for sure. I guess here's what I'm saying, right? So you're Senator Treat, right? And I'm Speaker McCall, God help me. And you're coming to me and saying, "Hey, dude, like, I know you've said that like you're not going to hear this, but like it's going to come up again. Like, I'm committed to getting this done." And I say, "Okay, fine. I'll bring it up for a hearing in the House, right? And I want my corporate tax cut in exchange.
Right.
Okay, so you give me my corporate income tax cut, and I'll give you school vouchers. Okay,
that's a tough bargain.
I mean, one, it's a tough bargain, but two, if I'm McCall, and if I'm McCall and you're a Treat, I'm saying you've already tried to lift this once and couldn't get it done. So, like, what assurances can you give me that if I get my people in line, you're going to get it across the finish line in the Senate? And who has a better chance of getting their caucus in line, McCall or Treat? I'm going to say it's McCall, mostly because Treat's already failed once.
I think it's Treat. Because, I mean, here's what I think would have been different. If Dom had been present...
Sure, he votes for it.
He votes for it, likely. I mean, there's maybe a question, but I think it's likely. And then some of those folks who flipped, that were like making deals at the last minute, might not have flipped, right?
They flipped twice. They were no's, they were red, then they went green, then went red again. Right. You think they stay green if Dom's there?
I think folks like Bullard and them would stay green because they want to be on the winning side. Even I think there's some power in being on the winning side of an issue, even when it passes your chamber, even if it's not a winning issue statewide, right? Because you've got some protection there. It's like the wisdom of crowds.
Interesting.
It can blow up in their face.
Sure.
But
okay, so let's say Treat gets it together and he gets it through the Senate. Does it pass the House?
Not right now. Not unless there's a heck of a deal.
Well, okay, let's say there's a deal. McCall wants it. Does it pass the House? I agree with you. Today, no, it doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
If McCall wants it, it'll pass. Yeah.
Okay, well, so I feel like you just admitted. You just said if McCall wants it, it'll pass.
If it already passed the Senate and then it goes to the House and then McCall wants it, yes. You've got the whole Senate power plus McCall plus the governor. If you're a lowly House member, you got to do it. Everyone else is on board.
So you think the X factor of McCall being able to get it through the House is whether it passed, like, the Senate?
Yeah, I think it's the difference. If it's like 75% done and you just have to like vote yes to get it the rest of the way, you got to do it. But if it's McCall trying to get his caucus to pass it first and then send it to the House, I think that's less likely.
Interesting. It is fascinating. I love that we just spent 15 minutes talking about that has nothing to do with the actual policy.
Well, this is
100% the like machinations of like the like politics of it.
This was a small glimpse into like our daily text exchange, right? This is what Scott and I are like. But what if? Let's say someone's allergic to blueberries, and then like this is someone brings muffins. This is how we rationalize or think through things. Well,
What else happened this week?
well, Scott, what else happened this week? Today, there is a new candidate in the CD2 race, right?
God, how many is this now?
8 Republicans. So the CD2 is Congressional District 2, currently represented by Mark Wayne Mullen.
Yep.
Technically inhabited, I think. Anyway, State Representative Avery Carl Fricks has announced that he is entering that race as well. So that gives us several state House members, which means his House seat will be an open seat, right?
Yes.
And so that district, for those interested, is up southeast of Tulsa. It's like the western half of Muskogee down to I-40, basically. So like Warner over to like Lake Eufaula. It includes Carrie Underwood's hometown of Shakota.
Oh, sure.
There's where 69 meets 40.
Do you
There's
see that
a single stoplight town?
Do you see that viral video this week of her and Anne Hathaway?
No.
Yeah, you should watch it. Oh wait, it was not Carrie Underwood. It's not Carrie Underwood. It's the other one, Kelly Clarkson. I get those confused all the time, which I know is terrible. I don't listen to like much top 40. It was not Carrie Underwood. It was Kelly Clarkson.
I respect Kelly Clarkson. I didn't at first, but I do over her career. She's been the original American Idol winner, right? Like she was the first season. And I think she's...
Is she? I mean, you're probably right. I don't know the answer.
Oh yeah, you should trust me on this. Carrie Underwood, as Simon Cowell said when she auditioned, that she will be the most successful Idol winner in history. And I think she still is. Like,
probably.
She has outstanding talent, I'll say it.
Yeah.
Didn't she marry a Canadian hockey player?
Yeah. I mean, remembering her name was a big step for me. So
Carrie Underwood? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
Really? Yeah. I mean, I used to watch Idol pretty religiously back then. I guess after she was on, but other than that, this week, kind of out of nowhere, managed care popped up. That's pretty important, and it has far-reaching consequences, right? So, like, it affects not just medical care, but mental health care and lots of things. Senator McCourtney, who has heretofore been openly opposed to managed care, was suddenly the author of a bill that seemed to maybe propose like a... It's not really managed care light, but it's like a...
It's 100% managed care. It's managed care without privatization, is what it is. Right? It's managed care where, if I understand it correctly, the healthcare authority contracts directly with providers as opposed to outsourcing that to a third party.
Right.
Which then takes a profit off the top.
Right. Which, that makes sense.
I mean, it's better. It's better. It's still. I haven't read. I got the bill text when he introduced it. It's 46 pages. I haven't read it yet. It's on my project for this weekend. Is to do a deep dive. I know there's been a lot of meetings. There's been a lot of calls from a lot of stakeholders. You know, the State Medical Association is obviously a big stakeholder. The Hospital Association is a big stakeholder. I don't know how involved they've been to this point with this. I think this is an ask from the Healthcare Authority to Senator McCourtney, and I assume that some of these other stakeholders are going to be more involved moving forward. The bill passed the Senate. Marcus McIntyre, friend of the show, hopefully we'll have him back on, is going to author the bill in the House. I expect there will be substantial changes to this before we're done.
Yeah, and McCourtney said in the floor debate that, like, this is not the final version. This is not the bill that he wants, but the title is off, right? So
I was going to say, did they take title off of
yeah,
it?
title's off. And so for listeners who may be new to the show, both of you, welcome. And having the title off means that, like, a bill is, like, handicapped. It's injured in some way, and it can't...
It can't go to final passage without the title on.
Right. And so that's like a way that they can be like, we're working on this. And it's weird to me to be like, let's keep going through the process while we keep editing the language. Because in my mind, I'm like, why don't you get the language finished first and then send the bill through? But yeah, so it's title's off, but it's in the House. I expect it'll probably end up in conference committee at some point with some changes there. Because if the House amends it, it has to go back to the Senate.
Right.
Or get more.
Which they will.
They will, yeah. And so, and McCourtney even said that he didn't know that it would pass this year, but this is the start of this conversation.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think good legislation of this size and scope should take a few years, right?
Yes, agreed.
You gotta sleep on it for a few, dozen nights, right? Like, you gotta really talk to people and dig in and do some calculations on what this is going to cost.
This affects hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, billions of dollars, millions of people, and it's one of those things. After you're done tinkering with it, you want to not have to tinker with it too much for a little bit, right? Like, you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, let's put this in perspective. If you're going to go build a house today, right? It's going to take at least, like in most cases, at least 6 months to build a house. Lots of changes along the way, lots of back and forth. Thinking about it, for one single house that costs, I don't know, $100,000, $200,000, right? And we expect to push through massive billions of dollars of impact bills in 4 months? No, like, it should take some time.
Median home price in the U.S. is $350,000.
Well, I've never had a house that much. But the house that I built was not that much.
You're like, if you're going to build a house for $100,000, $200,000, I was like,
well,
maybe if you're building in 1992.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, it's been 12 years since I built a house. But also, I think, I would imagine building a house is similar to throwing a wedding. You make the same number of decisions, but the scale of those decisions, right? Like,
sure,
whether you have 20 people at your wedding or 2,000 people at your wedding, you have to decide chicken or fish, right?
Sure.
Like, it's like the same decisions. You just order more of whatever.
What would you choose, chicken or fish?
If I'm choosing for an audience, I choose chicken.
Sure.
There's not enough people that like fish.
Okay.
They should. Fish is good. It's under. I love
good.
Fish.
If it's good fish.
Okay, Scott. Well, for you, if you're going to a restaurant and they are known to be equally delicious, are you going to choose the chicken dish or the fish dish?
I'm going to ask about the steak.
Well, that tracks. I thought you might ask what kind of fish, right?
No, I will. I'll be curious about so this is an actual. If we're actually asking the question, I'll be curious about the kind of fish, how it's cooked, and importantly, what comes with it.
Ooh, like the sides?
Not even sides, but like, are you talking about fish that's served with like a vegetable, a vegetable of some kind? Are you talking about chicken that's served with like a rice pilaf? Are you talking what are you?
Some kind of.
What are the accoutrements?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of which, this week I finally dined at Cajun Corner on 23rd for the first time.
Yeah, and?
It's good. I got like the fried trio, and it came with fries. There's a lot of fried food, and I've not eaten that much fried food in about 2 years, and I felt terrible later. It was good, but I've
heard it's quite greasy.
Well, a whole basket of fried food is indeed.
Just like in general, I've heard it's.
Yeah,
fairly heavy.
I had lunch with one of my friends from college, actually from high school, and he got the étouffée, and it looked really delicious. I'm gonna get that next time.
I do love a good bowl étouffée.
Yeah. This is more of a plate, but it looked delicious either way.
I mean, whatever vessel it comes in, I enjoy the étouffée.
Yeah.
Plate, bowl, mug. I'm not particular.
That's a restaurant model. Just a mug of étouffée. Gravy boat of étouffée.
There you go.
Everything.
We should open a shop.
The gravy boat and everything served in gravy boats.
Unfunded mandate serving étouffée by the mug.
That sounds delicious. Well, Scott, I think as we probably wind down here, we should talk about some of the election bills and the initiative petition bills. So we'll start there. On the initiative petition side, there are 4 House joint resolutions, all of which passed and go to the Senate. They do a few different things. One of them would change the threshold for passage from, like right now, you have to get a simple majority.
Sure.
50% plus 1 vote, right?
Sure.
Or we'll say 51%. That's easier math, but we know it's not that. So that's what it takes to pass an initiative petition or most anything, simple majority. This joint resolution would change that so that you have to get 55%, which does make it higher. And I think that is only for constitutional amendments. And arguably there could be an argument to be made that amending the Constitution should be a bit more difficult than it is. However, I will say it's already hard. Like, that's a lot of people to get to agree. So that was one of them that is of some concern, right? Because if you look back, as I have, and I could probably even post this link to my spreadsheet in the show notes, but I went through all of state history and looked at all of the ballot initiatives, and there's only a small handful that have passed with more than 55%, right? So like this would essentially neuter state questions as a path for legislation, which means, to say that another way, silencing the voice of the people, right? Like,
right. I mean, yes.
The other one that I'm of pretty high concern is House Joint Resolution 1002, and this one would change 2 things that are very important. Well, and they're both related. It changes how signatures are collected. And so right now, you have to get a certain percentage of signatures. We'll pause for the activity bus to drive by. It's like 4:30, yeah.
Never had a school bus on the street.
Well, they're lost.
Literally ever.
They're lost, clearly. So this would change how signatures are collected. So currently, if it's a veto referendum, it's 5%. If it's a statutory change, it's 8%. If it's a constitutional change, it's 15% of the registered voters statewide that voted in the most recent gubernatorial election, right? So if you've got a state question right now, you look back 4 years at the 2018 election, how many folks voted for mayor? You have to get 15 or 8 or 5% of that. This would change 2 things. One, it means you'd have to get that percentage, same percentages, but not statewide. It would have to be based on each county. So you have to get, let's say, 15% of every county. So 50% of Oklahoma County, 15% of Tulsa County, 15% of Custer County, Beaver County, all of the McCurtain County, all that stuff, which is much more difficult, not insurmountable, but really expensive and almost impossible. Secondly, and this is something people aren't talking about, it strikes that clause about the gubernatorial election. So it would be 15%, it says, of all legal voters in each county, which at the least...
Not registered?
It doesn't say...
legal voters?
Yeah, it doesn't say registered, and it doesn't say eligible. It's just legal voters. And so, well, that's ripe for a legal challenge.
I mean, yes.
First of all, because it's unclear, which means we have to the court to decide what that means, or throw it out, which would be ideal. But secondly, if it's either one, even if it's registered, which is lower than eligible, right? It effectively triples the number of signatures you need. And so right now you have to get 180,000 for a constitutional amendment, then you have to get close to 500,000, which is impossible. And you have to get that many you have to get 50% of each county.
Yeah.
Which is
absurd.
Right. Oklahoma already has one of the most difficult, with one of the highest signature thresholds and one of the shortest time frames in which to collect them, right? Some states might require fewer. Some states might give you more time. We get hit on both.
Right. I mean, and it's just, cards on the table. This has nothing to do with, like, there's a problem with the process now. This is legislators who oppose some of the things that voters have approved, notably medical marijuana and Medicaid expansion. This is legislators who don't want to see voters in Tulsa and Oklahoma City be able to set policy for the state.
Well, let me correct you. Or not correct you, but let me intervene. Because this has been the talking point, is like, well, it shouldn't just be urban people. It's not.
I mean, fair.
Every Oklahoman gets to vote on every state question.
But that's what I'm saying, is if you, there is a thought process that the way demographics are trending, if you can win a majority of the major urban centers, then you win a majority. You win a majority is a majority of the urban centers. And what this is trying to do is create an electoral college type system, right? It is trying to create a kind of senatorial system where rural voters have more of a say.
Right.
And they get more of a say because there are less of them.
Right.
Right? And that's bollocks.
Well, so there have been challenges in other states where this kind of thing was passed, that there have been legal challenges that were successful that argued that this essentially violated the one person, one vote standard that we have in America, right?
But so does the Senate.
Well, it's true. I mean,
so does the United States Senate, right? Like,
so I think it is. I mean, it's important for people to realize how important this is to Oklahoma and why this is happening right now. Right? It's clearly happening because of Medicaid expansion, because of medical marijuana, because of criminal justice reform, because of legislative inaction. Right? That is. It's really hard to run a ballot initiative. I know. I've done it. It's expensive and difficult. And there's a ton of things that can get in your way to do it. And the only reason that we do this is because our founding fathers, the framers of our state constitution, knew that the people must have this right, because there will be times in the history of our state where our state legislature will not do the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to do it, right? And then to win. And it's hard. So during debate on this, I don't know if you saw this, Scott, but during debate, they were talking about it, and someone said, okay, so let's say, someone needs 50,000 signatures to get on the ballot, right? But to be safe, they got 80,000, nearly twice what they needed. But under this, they have to get a certain percentage of every county. And let's say in one county, Beaver County or somewhere, Oklahoma County or whatever that is out there in the Panhandle, they were 100 votes, 100 signatures short in that county.
Thrown out.
They said, what happens? And the author was like, the whole thing gets thrown out. And that is bananas.
Yes.
Right? I mean, in that scenario, you could collect 2 million signatures, but be one short in one county.
Right.
And a county that only has 7,000 people who live there at all.
And the thing, and this is what I would love to have. Who's authoring this one?
There's a bunch of authors on there.
But the main guy is from he's from Ponca, right?
Tommy Harden, Frank Simpson, Ty Burns, and Kevin McDougal.
Like none of them would come on the show. I'd love to have them on the show and ask them this question, right? Like what they're saying is they're saying we want rural voters to have a voice. And we would say they do. They have the exact same voice as a voter in Oklahoma City or Tulsa or Lawton or Enid or Muskogee or wherever. They have the same, but you want them to have more, right?
Right. A preemptive veto.
Right.
That's what it is.
A voter in Beaver County, their vote counts just as much as a voter in Oklahoma City. The difference is that in Oklahoma County, there's 500,000 people, and in Beaver County, there's 7,000 people, or whatever there is. Right? And you don't like that, right? There's nothing unfair about it.
I mean,
right?
If you live there, it feels unfair, though. Like, I get it, but it doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do.
Right. I mean, well, what's unfair about it?
Well, it just feels unfair. The population of Beaver County actually is only 5,377.
Okay, so we overshot.
Well, we overshot there, and we undershot Oklahoma County.
What is Oklahoma? Is Oklahoma County what, 1 million? What is that on?
No, 700,000, I think.
It's,
I can.
Right?
Yeah, 797,000.
But like our votes count exactly the same.
Right.
It's just that when you count our votes, there are 797,000 of them, and when you count their votes, there are 3,000 of
Well,
them.
I mean,
And that's not good. It's not bad. It's just some places have more people.
right.
Right? Like,
Right. That's the way it goes. Because counties are just, I mean, our counties were drawn so that everyone who lived in the county could get to the county seat in one day by horse and buggy.
Right.
Like that's how they divvied it up.
Right.
There's a couple of counties that violate that, but by and large, that's how it was drawn.
but the fact that we're even talking about counties is just like nonsense. It is the people of Oklahoma. And if a majority of people in Oklahoma want something, like, we should get it, and it shouldn't matter what part of Oklahoma they live in.
I agree. I'm with you. And another thing.
I mean, right?
All right. Well, Scott, anything else you want to hit this week?
No, I think that's enough.
All right. Well, Scott, thanks for, I'll say thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me come over and record on your porch.
I mean, thanks for suggesting that we
record outdoors?
Because
That's
I was just thinking that it would be great to spend the afternoon out of doors.
It is. Well, weather permitting, maybe we can do it next week, too.
Love it. Would love for Bailey to get to be here for one of our in-person sessions.
I know. I think she's out of town next weekend as well. That's why we have three of us.
That's right.
We get to cycle through, right?
Indeed.
Well, listeners, thank you for being here as well. Thanks for listening week in and week out. If you haven't shared our podcast with your friends recently, please do. Thanks to those of you I've seen. Sky, I see that you share us on Twitter almost every week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Other listeners who aren't Sky, please also share it. We would love to get the word out. If you are interested in supporting what we do here, please go to letsfixthis.org. You can send us an email with questions or topics, suggestions, outrage even is probably fine.
We accept outrage.
Yeah, we get it. You can send an email to podcast@letsfixthis.org. And remember, as we move through this election year, that decisions are made by those who show up. That means at the legislature, at the ballot box, in your neighborhoods, on the doors, however you can show up. For yourself, for your neighbors, for your state. We hope you will. Have a great week.